Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Working Guilt-Free During the Pandemic session here at Women Transforming Technology. My name is Shanice Winland, and I am the Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion here at VMware. I am especially excited about this panel. A lot of us, including me, are dealing with multiple sets of responsibilities all at the same time and all at the same location all the time. And I have the pleasure of introducing the speakers for this session who are going to walk us through setting up the right boundaries and success measures as we all navigate this pandemic. Connie Guglielmo is Editor-in-Chief at CNET and a return speaker at Women Transforming Technology. She is joined by Laura Katen, author of the new book, The Communication Habit, and founder and CEO of Katen Consulting, which is a New York-based professional development training company that conducts workshops for organizations. And we are also joined by Carolina Milanesi. Carolina's career has spanned 2 decades, 3 companies, and 2 continents. She spent 14 years at Gartner, most recently as their Consumer Devices Research VP, and she is also the founder of Heart of Tech, a consumer technology consulting company. Please join me in welcoming Connie, Laura, and Carolina to Women Transforming Technology.
Janice, thank you very much for that introduction. Hello, everyone, and happy Tuesday. Thanks so much for giving us a little bit of your time to talk about what we all agree is a super important topic. I was thrilled when I was contacted by Women Transforming Tech. Again, this is my second time speaking at this panel, and I was speaking at this conference, and I was really happy to do it again because of the enthusiasm and the great interest that I witnessed from all of the women who attended in person at VMware. I think that was 2 years ago, just looking for some validation about some of the things they were going through in their career, but also creative problem solving and actionable, pragmatic advice. Everyone knows there are a lot of challenges and problems being a working adult in the United States and around the world, but being a working woman has a particular set of challenges. I know that we are joined by men and women, and hopefully all of this advice will resonate with both genders today. The idea for this discussion and the panel topic, which I'll review here in a second before turning over to the speakers, came actually from a personal experience that I had when my crew was sent home at the end of March, actually before California put their shelter-in-place order in. Our leader at CNET decided to send us all home the week before that happened because we could kind of see the writing on the wall that there was something serious that was about to happen and we needed to take it seriously. And the very first thing I asked of my editors, I have a team of reporters, editors, videographers, and photographers around the world. So what I asked them all to do was get in touch with every single person on their team and start building out schedules. And it was funny because the response was, well, what are you talking about, Connie? We're all going to be working at home. And I said, you are going to be working at home. However, it's not just you and your computer working at home. Some people have children and schools are going to be closed. Some people have extended family members that they're going to, have to care for. We have people who are in 2 work situations where they're both going to be working hypothetically full days. So we're going to have to build a schedule that accommodates the working pattern and the new workflow, whatever it is for our team, so that number one, we can take into account their personal situation and help mitigate whatever challenges or difficulties they may be first facing from work at home. Having a webcam is the least of it. And secondly, as a business, we have to make sure that not every single person on our team takes off every morning, every day, and we don't have coverage. We're a news organization, obviously 24/7. And so we needed to make sure that we had around the clock coverage while respecting, right, the need to accommodate schedules. And I can't even tell you how many people said, oh, that never even occurred to me because we're just working at home. So I'm just doing what I'm doing, but at home, sure, with your bookcase in the background, with your pets running around and your children locked out of the house for 8 hours. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Anyway, it got me to thinking and the conference organizers about what are the challenges that people are facing. And we are living the new abnormal. This is not the new normal, I say, because nobody knows. Every day seems to be different and bringing us new challenges. and new considerations. And that means that just because you're working at home shouldn't mean that you're working online all the time. It shouldn't mean that you should fear that if you need to take some time off to take care of some of the conflicting obligations that you might be coping with, that you might be penalized for work. It shouldn't mean that you're not understanding what the challenges and opportunities there are for your business, and maybe resetting what that success and what your role in that organization looks like today. And importantly, it does mean that you should be able to communicate effectively what those new standards in this new abnormal are. You should be able to have an interactive dialogue with not just your managers above, but your peers and the people that you manage, so that everyone understands what the rules of engagement are, that there's agreement, there's not, well, as minimal controversy as you can make it. There's always going to be some controversy. And we are living in a world where we're now interacting over video cam. And I asked Carolina and Laura, who are both experts in their field, excellent, smart women that I've had the great opportunity to know and work with over the past few years, or Carolina much longer than the past few years, to talk about some of these challenges and issues and offer the kind of pragmatic advice that when you leave this session, we're hoping that you can say, didn't think about that, or that's a new tip or technique or tool that I'm going to employ. So I've asked each of them to give you an overview of the two big questions that we're going to answer in this session. The first one is, again, what does success look like? How do you work guilt-free at home? What are the metrics? How do you even define them to make sure that you're feeling that you've got a good handle on what's going on? And then the second part will be, how do you communicate that effectively? There is all sorts of etiquette now involved with being part of a video conference world. And I remember Carolina put out a tweet that I think got a lot of retweets about how one of your biggest challenges was preventing or stopping yourself from eye rolling during conferences, because everyone could see you. So we're going to get
not a problem today.
Great, glad to hear it. I'm not going to be eye rolling either unless you make me laugh. All right, so those are the two big topics. I'm going to have Carolina start first, and then Laura will chime in with her thoughts. If you have questions, please feel free to use the Q&A or the chat window. We're going to try to monitor both. I will interject and offer some of your questions as I see them come up to our speakers as we go along. We want this to be a useful, interactive discussion. Again, we're all about flexibility and rolling with the flow and rolling with whatever is happening here. Hopefully there's not going to be too many technical challenges. I think we're all pretty solid right now. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carolina to begin.
Thank you, Connie, and thank you for inviting me today. Because when you posted the, the question, "Are you free?" and this is the topic, I was extremely excited because I think that in general, no matter if you're a woman or a man, if you have children or not, if you've never worked from home and you're finding yourself in this situation, it is challenging. It is challenging if you're part of a creative team where you don't see them every day, when you cannot, all hang around a table and brainstorm. But especially if you're a woman and if you do have a family, it is challenging because, as Shani said at the beginning, we are home, and the home is everything. It's the school, is the office, is the meditation and yoga room, and everything else that we try and fit in during the day. And I think that as women, it's quite interesting to me over the years and I've covered diversity, especially in tech, for a while now, talking to people and women in tech and in general in business, because it's not just the problem that tech has, and find that we struggle with actually get rid of guilt across the board, finding time for ourselves, finding time for our families. It reminded me, as I was thinking about the topic, of being on a plane soon after my daughter was born. So she's now 12. She must have been about 4 or 5 months old. And I was sitting next to this lovely lady with her daughter. who had special needs, and she was the most adorable girl that told me everything about her Barbie. And I was sharing with her, it was my first time on a business trip, and I was sharing with her the struggle of wanting to continue to work as I did before, not wanting to give in to people who immediately said that my responsibility and my priorities were changing because of a child, and feeling extremely guilty. I felt guilty all the time. I felt guilty when I was working because I felt I was letting down my family, and I was guilty when I was with my family because I was letting down work. And she listened very quietly, and then she said, do you think that your colleagues who are not married or who are not a mom and take off early to go to the gym or come in late in the office and go to the gym, do they feel guilty? And it threw me because I never thought about it that way. And I said, yeah, no, I don't think they do. And she's like, so why are you? And a lot of it made me realize that a lot of this guilt that we feel is self-inflicted. We just feel guilty, and we shouldn't. And I think part of that is learning your worth and learning that what you do matter. And then I'm going to let Laura talk about communication, because how you communicate that, how you communicate your needs, how you communicate, even just your day-to-day and what your work looks like, what your challenges are, is also very important. So for me, the first step of working guilt-free is getting rid of your own guilt. Nobody is well, in sometimes, most cases, I think, if especially, you're a manager, Connie, you know that if people come to you and talk to you about their needs and what they might, from a schedule perspective, from a setup perspective, like you said, it's not just about the children, it's about extended family, it's about the extra emotional stress that you might be under because you're concerned about loved ones that are, in hard-hit places, in this case, with a pandemic. So we need to all be sensitive to other people. We need to talk, we need to communicate, we need to listen, and really start with that self-worth. For me, that is probably the most important point that I would like to drive in. And then there's a whole set of conversation about time and schedule. Is interesting that you mentioned that, because especially with this boom of Zoom, as we are doing it now, right? We spend hours and hours on video, and aside from the eye rolling, it is also the case that you're not multitasking, you're really focusing. And then when you're done your 8 hours of meetings on video, you have your work to do. It can be, replying to email, it can be writing something, whatever the case might be. And that extends your hours. And so making sure that you have a schedule, that you don't go overboard, is important. And generally, think long term. Don't think, oh, it's okay, because I'm only going to be doing it a couple of weeks, because it might not be a couple of weeks. It might be a couple of months. And then what happens if that is expected of you all the time? You're going to end up, burning out. So that's not obviously good for you, and it's not good for your work either. And so,
Carolina, you bring up a really good point, if I can interject here.
Absolutely.
The guilt factor, right? So I want everybody right now to think about the different components of their lives. And I want you to think about the different components of your lives as a pie chart. What are the different slices that make up your life, and assign a percentage to each of the focus you have to give to them, right? Carolina was speaking, it was so interesting to listen about. She felt guilty when she was at work. She felt guilty when she wasn't at work. How would you assign the different aspects of your life? What are their percentages? And I want you to think about, as you think about this pie chart, are you a slice of this pie? Do you give time to yourself? Or are you so busy giving to everybody else that you really don't invest in yourself? And so when you were speaking, Carolina, I thought that was incredibly important to hit that home, that whether you have a child, whether you're married to your job, whether you have many different facets going on that are not family related, are you also investing in you? And very interesting why we don't want you to feel guilty. If you are investing in yourself, well done. You seem to find the balance between that difficulty of self and others. If you haven't invested in yourself and you're feeling guilt around that, there's very interesting research that's come out from the New York Times that says that if you schedule time, the benefit of that anticipation, sensing that that's going to happen, the event is going to happen, is overwhelmingly a benefit to you because you expect it as if the event actually happened. It hasn't even happened yet, but you're still enjoying that anticipation. And so that's a key piece that might diffuse some of that guilt, is just to schedule it now for later. So I wanted to interject that, Carolina. That was an important piece for me.
I totally agree. I think if I look at my pie, it's terrible. Has always been that, like, my little bit of the pie for me is very small. And I think as to, you know, you learn a lot of that with time. And I think depending on where you are on your career, you're more comfortable saying no. You're more comfortable talking and advocating for yourself. And so sometimes I think it's easier, you know, for people that are more established and more secure within an organization. Sometimes it's your manager that allows you to speak up more. But it is important. I totally agree with you. And I love the way that you put it. It's about investing in yourself, because that investment, it will come out at work as well. So thank you for interjecting.
Yes, and my thought is that if everybody who's part of our panel can leave the panel saying, what is my pie piece? Do I even have a pie piece? What are the percentages that are dedicated to each aspect of my life? And if I'm not in that pie chart, maybe the first step, to your point, Carolina, for those who aren't used to giving back to themselves and investing, is they simply just schedule a 10-minute listening to the Calm app next week, or they schedule a Zoom coffee with a friend, just for a little bit of time to invest back. How can we all continue to drive the success of our families and our children and work if we're not refueling ourselves? And so I love this topic.
I want to just interject, and then Laura, I want you to pick up some more on this. One of the biggest challenges I've had as a manager, and it'll be interesting to see all of this data, you know, months into the future, is how productive people have been in the past 2 months. Our productivity of my team is off the charts. Now, I think it's because people want an escape from what's happening in the real world, and they're at home, and it gives them something to focus on, and maybe they shouldn't be focusing on so much. But I've had to tell my team and remind them to take some time off, because anybody who is an effective manager knows that if it's taking you 10 hours to do something that would normally take you 2 hours, that's really not an effective use of your time. And I made a joke last week with my team, and I did take a day off. It was my wedding anniversary on Wednesday. And normally I would have taken a Monday or a Friday, right, and had a long weekend, but who knows what the day of the week is these days anyway. So I took the Wednesday off, but I said, if you feel that you're working all the time and you're like the go-to engine and you're keeping us all afloat because you're not going to let up, well, you're going to burn out, as Carolina said, but also okay, I'll send you the Martyr of the Year certificate and you can pin it to your wall, but that is not a sustainable place to be. And from a management perspective, I don't want to have 30 burned out people in 2 months, because that burnout, we all started this journey kind of together and we're all on the same path. I've been comparing where we are, our progress, against Matt Damon's progress in the movie, you know, in Mars. And by now his tomato plants were pretty high and he was harvesting potatoes, excuse me. But yes, if you're not being effective and taking time for yourself, it's going to take you longer to do things. And so now you're actually wasting time, which is the most valuable commodity I think that we all have. But Laura, I'm going to turn over to you.
Yes, just what you said also is that part of what I think about when people are constantly committed to work is that there's also a fear that if I'm not, when you talk about communication, if I'm not committed, if I'm not the martyr of the year, what am I communicating to my manager? What am I communicating to my team, right? Am I not doing enough? Am I not competent enough? Am I not credible? Will I be undermining myself? And that's a huge piece of it, is fear driving this overcommitment piece. So it's incredibly important to me as I think about how do we define success for ourselves? How do we live up to the current expectation? One really important key for me is to define success as it stands now. Connie, you bring up a great point, which is, does our vision of success from before we started working remotely, does it even suit this environment now? It may not. And so if you ask somebody, what does success mean to you? We say, oh yeah, we have an idea, but have you ever really written it out? I look at everything from a communication standpoint. And to articulate what success means to you is incredibly important, because you can have the conversation around it, which brings me to my second point. Number one, is success as you define it now the same as it was before for you, or has it really changed to meet the environment where it is? And number two, are you having the conversations with your senior leaders, with your teams, with your laterals around what success looks like for you? For example, if you're hitting your targets every week, but you're also juggling at the same time all these different facets of the pie chart, maybe it's going to behoove you to sit down with your manager and say, hey, can we have a virtual chat? I'd really like to redefine what my KPIs are for the month. Or having a transparent conversation with your team about, here's my expectation. Because a lot of the fear that's driven is what's expected of me as a team member, or I don't have the supplies that I need. I'm not in my normal space. I'm sitting at home and I have a different room set up. It's not my comfort. So as a manager, having that transparent communication, what does success look like for us as a team? What is your role in that wheel of success? What am I needing from you? What is okay to put on the back burner? Having those conversations is incredibly important.
Laura, what's the language to use to have that conversation? Because what if you're up against someone who doesn't want to reset the metrics or the KPIs? And
great question.
You know, if they want to communicate the reason why, but I think if there's a time in the world that you get a pass on not meeting your sales or your business goals, I mean, like, this is it, right? Like,
Yeah.
realistically, we've seen all of the public, filings from public companies about all the misses they have. And so if you can do that publicly as a company, we're going to miss, because guess what? There's a pandemic and, business is at a standstill. How do you communicate that? And if you're up against somebody perhaps who's not as eager to embrace that message as you would have liked them to be?
Yeah, Connie, that's a great question, because oftentimes we're going to be met with people who aren't like-minded, right? They want you to keep moving and be intense and go forward. So I have two strategies around this that you can use immediately. And one is WIFIT. I love acronyms because they quickly get you to remember a really important strategy. WIFIT is what's in it for them. Many of us are familiar with WIFM, which is what's in it for me. It's about them. So if you're trying to share with somebody what your success looks like right now, and you're coming up with it, they're meeting you and they're challenging you, position what you want to say so that it's important to them. And usually there are couple of things that are really important to someone. Results, reputation, how does the job make him or her look? How does it make the team look? How does it make the company look? Or relationships. If you can speak the language of that person who's listening and position what you want to say so that they see that they're still benefiting and you're speaking their language, you'll probably get less pushback, because what you've said very succinctly, and please make it succinct, right? Conciseness is a huge strategy. What you've said to them by making it a WIFIT, what's valuable to them in this conversation, is I know what's important to you, I've heard it, and I'm relating it to what I'm needing. That's what I would say, Connie, positioning up front what's most important in that person's sphere and how what you're asking for is still going to provide value.
Carolina, what do you say to that?
It's funny that you're talking about the languages, Laura, because that was actually a point that I learned a long time ago when I read the book, The Languages of Love, I think is the title.
Very good book. Yes.
That's right. And realized very quickly that it does not just apply to relationship, but, you know, in terms of love relationship, but it does apply to people you're working with as well. So I totally agree with you that it is about what's in it for them. I think that the other part of it is not just kind of talking in a way that they can relate to. So not just about, you know, the customers. Some people just understand numbers. And so, you know, be prepared to come with numbers. And that can be, you know, how many outputs if you're writing, you know, how many articles you're reading, how many inquiries you've taken, whatever the case might be, how many meetings you've been on for a day. But I think the other part, going back to the question of success, about redefining what success is. Yes, it's about the situation we're in today. So for instance, as an analyst, I spend a lot of time out actually meeting clients, and that's not happening. It's happening at home. My world has changed upside down because I spend way more time talking to people that I've ever done before. But I don't see anybody in a physical world. You know, there's no events to go to. There's no, you know, press to meet and talk. So I have to redefine that success and what my day looks like and what I don't have a manager, but, you know, what my clients might see me, right? The way that my clients perceive me, if you have a business of your own, it is about them. It's about, will they still get value from you? And in that redefinition of success, you have to think about your success, not just from a work perspective, but you as a full human being, right? Am I successful if I get to the end of the day every day and I'm totally exhausted? Am I successful if I'm stressed out with my kids all the time? Am I, you know, successful if I haven't had 5 minutes to read a book in the past 6 months and I'm still catching up on Laura's book? So, you know, I think it's really looking at you as a human being and not just you as an employee, you as a manager, because I think that will help with that pie picture that Laura started with.
And Carolina, you bring up another very good point. May I, Connie, interject?
Yes.
Which is, you say this word perception. Brilliant word, especially when we talk about communication skills, because part of defining success, let's talk about the baseline of success, which is your competence and your credibility and the perception that other people have around those traits. So if you lay the foundation that you're competent and credible and people perceive you that way, that's incredibly important. And if you're not sure how you want to be perceived, then how can other people perceive you that way? So I would also encourage you to think of 3 words for how you'd like other people to perceive you, because then when you have a clear idea of how you want to be perceived, you're intentionally making decisions and taking action to get you that way, which then goes full circle back to seeming to be successful the way you want to be seen.
Give us examples of some words. I mean, I think most people want to be seen as smart and competent and
confident,
yeah, etc. But Laura, what are some other words that you might not think about that you should be striving for?
Executive presence is a huge buzzword right now for us. That's a higher level of being able to exhibit confidence, clarity, and credibility. Being seen as trustworthy is huge. And that's often, when you think about credible and you break down credibility, there's always 2 words we think about. We think about competence and we think about character. The question that I pose always is, you might think you're competent, you might think you're confident, but are you being seen that way? Are you making yourself visible? Are you putting yourself in situations where people know you're trustworthy, that you exude executive presence? Here's another one that I want you to think about. We are in a pressure cooker, many of us. There's so many variables that are different than when we work in our sphere, our normal sphere. When you are in that kind of pressure cooker, are you responding versus reacting? So when you think about words, I want you to think, are you intentionally responding versus emotionally reacting. And that's another piece of exuding confidence, clarity, and credibility.
That's excellent. One of the things that I have been able to do in my role, and this is messaging above and below, is to get people to rethink productivity. And I don't need people to produce things that are not effective. So I try to measure people on effectiveness. Is that something that resonates with both of you? Am I on to the right track there? I'd rather have someone be effective and communicate how effective they were than come in and tell me they did 10 things or 50 things or 100 things.
100%, Connie. And often what I say is, I'm not looking for perfection, right? You're looking for performance. We're not needing to do 1,000 things. We're needing to do a quality job. We're needing people to know that we're committed to it, that we're focused, right? Something that Carolina brought up early in the discussion was when she's with her daughter, she's with her daughter. When she's at work, she's focused. That's incredibly important. The onlookers, are they watching you as you perform your tasks or hit your targets? That your mind is fully engaged in that, and that you're delivering the highest quality product or service that you can. That's key. It's never about perfection for me. It's about being effective and performance.
But it's interesting that both, so Connie, you say effective, and Laura, you said about being trustworthy. And I think that these 2 points, I've seen a question asking, how do you deal with a manager at this time when they might not trust you? If you're not online, you're not working. And that's where these 2 important words come in, right? Because your manager should know that you can be trusted to do your work. And your effectiveness is not linked to the amount of hours that you're on video or online or you're answering email. I always said to the team that I used to manage in my previous job that I actually was happier with people that read an email and made the choice not to answer that email because it wasn't urgent, than not the people that would send me email at 3 o'clock in the morning, because then I will receive it and I will read it, right? So I think that discipline and that maturity of knowing how to be effective is also very important, and that will help you be in the moment. It took me forever to learn that, being with my daughter and reading email on my smartphone wasn't actually being with my daughter. Being in the moment at work and at home is what gives you that guilt-free experience, is really letting go and just enjoy and be in that moment and being effective at what you're doing, being a mom, playing tennis or answering a client inquiry.
And there's a really important piece here that we haven't spoken about, which is not apologizing when you do that. Right?
Absolutely.
So once you've done that, not apologizing for then doing it. Also, when you want others to see you as competent and credible, you could be doing all of the things in the world to do that. As Connie said, doing 10 different items and working 18 hours a day. But if you're not articulating the value that you're bringing, and in my world, we call that a value statement or a credibility statement, where it's a couple of sentences that allows the person to know what's the value that you're bringing. What are you doing? Because when you share that, and many of us, men and women, we often don't talk about what we're doing because we're afraid it sounds like we're bragging. And so making sure that we're visible so that people know our competence and our credibility, making sure that we're not apologizing when we're investing in each of the pie pieces of our life, those 2 things are incredibly important from a communication aspect.
I'm curious if you think, Laura, if that idea of being visible is linked to being proactive in the way that we communicate, which is, I think, harder for women than it is for men, because we immediately say, well, if I let my manager know that I've done this, it sounds like I'm bragging, when you're not, right? You're being proactive and you're communicating. How do we get out of that mindset?
It's a wonderful question. And there's research around the fact that it is gender-based. There are more women who are more hesitant to talk about themselves because they're afraid it looks like bragging, where men are often rewarded for having that conversation. And so this goes back to everything, these great questions that Connie has posed, which include, how do you define success? And once you define it, how are you making yourself visible? And are you showing the value that you're bringing to the situation through the tasks that you're doing and the performance that you're having? And just switching your mindset is incredibly important. Changing that self-talk to say, and here's the differentiating factor. It goes back to the WIFIT. If you just talk about your successes, your education, the degrees you have, your accomplishments, how much you're getting done, it's bragging. If you talk about the value that you bring and connect it to the person listening and how that person benefits, it's not bragging, it's self-promotion and increasing visibility in a way that's valuable. So for everybody out there who's hesitant to talk about themselves because you think it's bragging, I encourage you to sit down and write a credibility statement, which is 4 or 5 sentences that talk about the value that you bring or what you're currently bringing to the table and the benefit of it to others.
And I would say, as a woman, when you do that, just think a bit higher, because we always, we always downplay our value. So just be generous with yourself.
I'm sorry, I want to say that I took Laura's session on executive presence, and she had all of us do this as an exercise. And as the editor in the room, a lot of people had me look at their credibility statement. And the number one problem that with the statements that I read from the women who wrote them, they were fact-based, but they were incredibly boring.
Right.
They were just like, there was no sizzle. And everybody's job is interesting.
Yes.
Everybody can position their job in a way that conveys a sense of excitement. And if you can't, maybe you need to find a new job. But hopefully there's something about your job that you can convey in a way that shows that you have passion for it and that you're engaged and interested. And if your credibility statement reads like something that nobody would want to read, get a friend to come and edit it with you.
And in addition to that, Connie, you bring up a great point, because in addition to having it be interesting that people want to listen to it. So number one, you're going to engage somebody if there's value to the listener. If they see how you relate to them, they're engaged. If the verbiage you choose. Now, as a communication expert, we haven't talked yet about word choice. We undermine ourselves all the time with words that we choose to use. And we'll often do that more often than not when we're speaking about ourselves, because our bodies and our words can cave inward. This is embarrassing, this is uncomfortable, and so I don't really want to say it, but I'm going to. And we use words that undermine us, so it negates the power of what we're saying. So another point I want to bring up is, yes, the credibility statement or anything you say, you want it to be powerful through engagement and also through word choice, vocal delivery, and non-verbal communication.
So someone has asked, give us an example of a good credibility statement. Laura or Carolina? Laura, why don't you give us yours?
Yeah, Laura.
Let me explain the difference between a credibility statement, an elevator pitch, and a self-introduction. A self-introduction is very brief. It's usually your name and your title or one sentence about you. Good afternoon, my name is Laura Katen. I'm a keynote speaker. It tells you something about me. It really doesn't share a lot of my value. Mm-hmm. An elevator pitch shares the value of a product or service. A credibility statement sells your value. Good afternoon, my name is Laura Katen. I teach 4 topics under the umbrella of communication skills, and I travel across the country on average about 100 days a year speaking to professionals like yourselves. I look forward to sharing some really key strategies with you today, which will help to support and benefit your success. So what I did was I shared a little more about the value that I bring. You know right away that I travel speaking about this topic, so I probably know a little bit. And that the communication is my expertise, but I related it back to how everything I'm going to say is going to benefit you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to to your session now.
I want you there. I want you there.
Just as a reminder, Laura's book, Communication Habit, is published. You can download it as an ebook, which is what I did. And it's extremely worthwhile to read it because I learned so much from just our 2-day session that my company was very kind about having our women executives take with her. To that end, we had talked about, as part of the prep for this session, about how some of the behavior or mannerisms or even language that can undermine you in the physical world may be exacerbated or heightened now that we're living in this virtual video world. Yes. So I'd like both. I mean, Carolina, I mentioned your eye roll, so I want to get to that. But Laura, talk about some of the tips or techniques or even the problems that people don't understand that they're making a mistake.
Great point, Connie. So first, we all have to be very mindful. You have to increase your awareness. What do you do really well when it comes to communication skills? And what could be a barrier to your success? First, that's really important because until you know what you do in general, day to day in life, you're not going to realize how that's transferring to the virtual world. And to Connie's great point, when it transfers, it's exponentially more focused on. Because take Zoom for a moment. If you're only being seen from the waist up, then I'm going to only concentrate on your facial expressions or your hand gestures or your body. So here are some quick tips that will help to support your nonverbal and vocal delivery. Number one, when you're thinking about your body, the number one rule that I love is hands don't touch. Because if hands touch, then when we're uncomfortable or in an awkward situation, we will subconsciously concave inward and will make our body smaller. You want to have more presence, right? You want to take up space, especially when you're on camera, because all I concentrate on are your arms and your face. You want to make meaningful eye contact. You want to smile and have an approachable face. You don't always have to smile, but making sure that your face looks approachable, especially in this virtual world where we're concentrating on it, is important. Now, there's a whole nother side to this, which is that many people have opted not to use the camera and just have the audio. So this heightens the importance of your voice. Research tells us that if you take away your body language, which is over half of the message you communicate when you're speaking to somebody, if you take that away, 80% of the message you communicate is how you sound. We haven't even gotten to words yet. It's your vocal delivery. And there are 6 elements that could make or break you. If you're interested in that, I know that we can answer that question. And so how you sound becomes exponentially more important. Do you sound exasperated? Do you sound tired? Do you sound frazzled? Do you sound energetic? Are you excited about something? Are you pacing out yourself so you don't sound too fast-paced and not too slow? And then words are incredibly important because now the audio, we're focusing on your words. And there are categories of words that can undermine you immediately and dilute the impact of what you're saying. I'm going to give you a couple of them because they're so critical and you can utilize them immediately. Filler words. Filler words are any of those little words that don't mean anything, but they dumb down our sentiments because they confuse the situation. Like, so, you know, basically, actually, literally. The second big category, wimpy words, or what we tag weak words. 3 of the biggest words that you want to avoid when you're trying to exude confidence, credibility, and competence are I think, I feel, and I believe. Because what that says is it doesn't give the sense of confidence and conviction that you're wanting your words to have. And so the question then becomes, what do I say instead? And Connie, I know if we have time, I can answer that question, but I also want to give Carolina a chance to
wait, you have to answer that question.
Oh, I have to answer that.
That's a cliffhanger moment.
Yeah, you can't, yeah.
No,
exactly.
I love my cliffhangers. So here it is. If you promise me right now to avoid using I think, I feel, I believe, I'll give you words that will allow what you say to be substantive and impactful without seeming aggressive, which I know that oftentimes, again, as women and sometimes men, we use wimpier words because it softens our message. And somebody told us once that we were overly direct or we were aggressive. And so now we start to over apologize and we soften our language, but in the process, we're undermining ourselves. So here are the words that you want to substitute. Instead of saying, I think we should, my thought around that is this. So the first one is my thought. My suggestion is, here's my recommendation. My guidance would be, from everything Connie shared, my perspective is. Those words are powerful, they're substantive, and they don't create doubt or uncertainty around what you're saying.
Excellent. Carolina, you talked about eye rolls and body language. I know that you've been in your home office for a long time. What's your advice?
A few things. One is be yourself. I take everything that Laura said, but it's going to be exhausting if this is something you're learning and you want to do it all the time. So if you are measuring every word you say, if you are being careful about not saying, I think, I believe, I feel, which I do all the time, it can be exhausting. So cut yourself a break and practice with people that are safe. For what worked for me, for instance, was I start doing that when I write, because I have a little bit more time. And so the way, instead of starting a sentence, I think blah, 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 I start with a blah, 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 because that's exactly what I think. If you're reading something I'm writing, that's what you want to read. And I think as you do it that way, and I just said it, it becomes the way you speak. So try and practice in some kind of way. The other thing is, in my view, is there's me as a human being, as I said earlier, and that needs to come across. It's important to me that my followers on social media, my customers, my partners see me as me, not a version of me at work. So everybody now, the 500 people that are listening to us, see my cat tree in the back here. This is my home office. And there are, motivational quotes on the walls, and there's a logo of my company, but there is a cat tree because I have 2 cats, 2 dogs, and I talk about me as a human being because there are different layers, and that comes across. I'm Italian. You see my hands everywhere. For me, that's part of the way I communicate. It is important to me. So take all the advice that was fabulous, that I will take myself, that Laura just gave, and just tailor it in a way that makes that progression natural to you. And I think the other important point to remember is, when they tell you not to look at the pink elephant in the room, now you said I think, and I say it all the time. Anyway, the other important point as well is that the camera is important if you are a person that reads cues a lot as well. So it's not just about you, but it's the people that you see in the camera. So if that helps you in real life, it's going to help you in this kind of new normal. But it can be exhausting. So cut yourself a break again. And, if somebody invites you to a virtual coffee, don't be afraid to say, you know what, I've had 7 today, on video. Can we just have a normal call, or can we do it another day? Don't exhaust yourself.
And Carolina, I'm so glad that you said that, because it can be exhausting to realize that you want to switch something. When you're aware of something and you're saying, you know what, I do undermine myself, I over apologize, or I do concave my shoulders in, and I make myself smaller in presence than more confident. It can be exhausting to switch that. So 2 things I want to piggyback onto what Carolina said. Number 1 is you can't do everything. So if there are 1 or 2 things you want to change, focus on those 1 or 2 things and let everything else go. There's plenty of time to switch things and learn skills and do more. The second piece of that is authenticity is incredibly important. Amy Cuddy, who's the famed body language expert, she once said, fake it until you become it.
Yes.
Because if you fake it till you make it, it's phony, it's not authentic. But if you believe in something that I've shared about not over apologizing, or your body language, or not using undermining words, and you truly believe that, fake it, practice it, just go through the motions if you truly believe in it until it becomes natural for you, because then you don't even have to think about it. So authenticity and taking on some of these skills are incredibly important when they're meaningful. And if they're not, let it go.
So someone has asked, Laura, what is the third category of words that can undermine and dilute your message? You covered 2, but you said there were 3.
So there are 6 in my book. There were 3 that I was going to share with you on this call because of time purposes. So the first one we said was filler words. The second one was weak or wimpy language. And the third, and thank you for keeping me honest, is self-sabotaging language. This is a big one for a lot of us. Examples of that. I've been speaking too much. This might be a stupid question, but correct me if I'm wrong. To be honest, can we be honest here for a minute? All of these self-sabotaging words and phrases undermine the credibility that you bring to the table. Every single person has insecurities, every single one of us. Don't give your cheat sheet to somebody else. So I want you to remember it this way. Don't be the driver of the bus that runs you over.
Excellent. I want to add one other piece of advice that I just recently got. I interviewed Laura Prepon, who is on that show, Orange is the New Black, and she was on that 70s show. She just did a book, You and I as Mothers, which is about her experience becoming a mother. And she leans into what she calls her mom squad. This is her selection of friends and family, you know, who are giving her advice. And the most valuable piece of advice I read, there's some great stuff in that book, which just came out in time for Mother's Day. So if you're looking for another book to not read for a while, You and I as Mother's Day, Laura Prepon. But the one piece of advice that she shared was from her friend Mila Kunis, who's an actress who's married to Ashton Kutcher. And what I liked about her advice was this: whenever she goes off to work, she has 2 young children, she never makes it sound that going off to work is a bad thing. She's always like, hey, guys, now mommy gets to go off and do this, whatever thing that she's doing. And you get to go off and have your day. And if you tell people and minimize what you're doing or make it sound like it's bad or a chore, you're modeling that, not just for your children, but for people around you. So be enthusiastic about the things that you choose to do and also how you describe what you do.
And I think a lot of what we talked up until now also refers to your partners, not just to your managers and the people that you interact with at work. If you're a woman, don't put what you do as less important than what your partner does. Make sure that that value that you see in yourself and that contribution is understood from a partner perspective. Because if you have children, I think that you know, things are changing, and especially here compared to, for instance, if I look back at Italy, and you know, I would never move away from my sink if that was still the case, right? But there's still that idea that what we do as women, it might not be as important as what, you know, the father does in the family. And so make sure that if you're both working from home and you and your partner are working from home, that partnership is a true partnership. And so we might decide that, tell you what, I take the kids in the morning and all your meetings are in the morning while I take care of the kids, or the other way around. Make sure that worth and that contribution is understood by your partner, and that communication flows. You have a tough day, make sure that your partner knows, and the other way around, because that will help you balance your day better at this time, and also not drag into the weekend. There was a question that was, you know, I'm struggling with all the days being the same, and Connie joked about, you know, what day is today anyway. And there is that, you know, our routine has gone out the window. We are home every day, and we do all the same things every day. So it's quite hard it's quite easy actually to get caught up into this. And then your Sunday is the same as your Wednesday. So make sure that you do cut out a little bit of that routine for the weekend as well, and say, okay, I'm not going to work. If you are trying to either catch up or get ahead for the week, limit yourself to a time and say, I'm going to have, 2 hours on, Sunday morning or Saturday morning to catch up or get ahead, but don't just drag it. And to Laura's point earlier, don't make it combined. So don't try and do that when you're trying to watch a movie with your husband. It's either one or the other so that you are in that moment.
And Carolina, Connie, I want to take it one step further from the communication standpoint. You bring up this brilliant point of you value what you bring to the table. In the workplace too, from a communication standpoint, oftentimes when somebody compliments us, we say, oh, it was Carolina, it was Connie, it was nothing, it was the team. That all has its place. From a communication aspect, it's also incredibly important to your competence and your credibility that you take credit also. If somebody gives you a compliment, Laura, great job. It's important that you say, thank you so much for recognizing. So if you're uncomfortable taking compliments, if you dismiss that compliment too many times, people will stop giving them to you because they think you don't deserve them. So what I would encourage you to do is come up with one sentence that you're comfortable saying. When somebody compliments me, I now, instead of dismissing it, say, thank you so much for recognizing. That's my sentence. And so they feel good about themselves. I've accepted that compliment. And that's an important piece. So not only at home, but also in the workplace, acknowledge the value that you bring because that's important.
Okay, so we have 3 minutes left to this conversation, which is fascinating and we could do for days.
Yes.
Thank you both, Laura and Carolina, for your brilliant insight. It's always a pleasure. I asked each of them to close out by, if you could only remember one thing from this hour conversation, or you listen to that session, what's the one thing you remember? What's the one thing that you would like our listeners to take away? Laura, go ahead and go first.
The one thing that I would like you to remember is not to self-sabotage through your body or your words the value that you bring.
That your line about don't drive the bus that runs you over has been repeated here. That's a t-shirt, people. Somebody needs to put that up.
God, get the t-shirt.
Know, right?
Send me a t-shirt. Send me one.
Yeah, you should patent it.
Carolina.
For me, the most important thing is recognize your self-worth. You are important to yourself first. Yeah, you matter to you. And then that will help you have other people see what you're worth.
I'm going to leave with, remember, we are living the new abnormal. And if anyone thinks they know what's going to happen, they don't. And so expectations need to change because what we're living has changed so dramatically. And you shouldn't have to apologize or feel guilt about redefining what you do, what your value statement is, what your success metrics look like, how many hours in a day or week is reasonable to work. All of that is up for negotiation now as we try to get through whatever this thing is that we're living through. It will come to an end. And as Carolina and Laura said, we don't know when that's going to be. So in the meantime, you still have to live every day. So just remember, we want you to live your life guilt-free, make good choices, choose the right words, don't drive the bus that runs you over. It's okay to show people your cat climbing structure. I'm sitting in front of my son's bookcase, so if anybody wants to judge me on those books, those are my sons, but I did pick them out, so I'm going to own that. And we hope that you all have a wonderful rest of the week. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.